I'm Mardell.
And I'm Pat from Goat's Head Studios.
And you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to a special edition of the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's May 27th, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. These podcasts are published to celebrate the exhibitors of this year's virtual edition of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. TCAF is an annual event gathering comic book creators from around the world to promote broad and diverse voices towards the betterment of the medium of comics through panels, keynote exclusives, and just basically enjoying the fun of comics. On this episode, I chat with Mardell and Pat from Goat's Head Studios at TCAF 2021. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Goat's Head Studios was started in 2018 as a place for Mardell and Pat to publish all of their comics. In addition to Legends of Fomora, Goat's Head Studios has published The Forgotten Village, the bestiary coloring book, and the short story Hangary. Mardell is the head writer at Goat's Head Studios. She's been a lifelong writer of prose and began writing comics in 2017. When not crafting comics, Mardell enjoys board games and sewing. Pat is their cartoonist at Goat's Head Studios. He started making comics in 2011 and has been unable to stop since. In addition to comics, Pat likes to paint miniatures, play video games, and think quietly. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Mardell and Pat from Goat's Head Studios at TCAF 2021. So, Mardell and Pat Rozelis-Netupsky, thank you very much for joining me for this chat.
Thanks for having us, John.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate your time. What I normally do to start off the interview... Someone else, we didn't introduce your other member there.
Yeah. He stayed quiet the entire time. He's been so quiet.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay, we should have introduced him too, I think.
I think that's what he was upset about.
Yeah. It's like, wait, didn't you talk about me? No, it happens. I remember doing some interviews and there's dogs in the background, but it's okay. It's all good. We're all at home right now anyway, right? So.
Exactly.
Okay, so let me ask you again. What I normally do to start off the interview is ask the creators about their first comic book. So I'd like to ask each of you, what was the first comic book that you read?
So I started reading a lot of comics when I moved. I moved from Mexico to Maine when I was 13, and we didn't know anybody, and so we spent a lot of time in the library, my sisters and I, and we just we devoured books, and we kind of gravitated to comics, and so I think one of the first ones that I read was Bone by Jess. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I started with the single issues. My sister bought me a couple, and yeah, it was fantastic.
That's a good start. How about you, Pat?
I was never a really big comics kid, and I think I was probably in my teens when I picked up my first comic book. And I want to say it was a Transformers comic because I was just all about robots. Mm-hmm. And I started collecting them for a little while, but it wasn't until really I met Mardell, and she was like, look at all these amazing things. There's web comics, there's comic books, there's graphic novels. And, I was off to the races.
That's great. Lots of good influences there. So, but I'm wondering, who influences your work today? Who are you reading today that makes a difference in what you're doing?
So for me, it's Nightlights by Lorena Alvarez. And I just I love her art, but I also just love how she introduces kind of magic into her story, even though it's something very mundane, and it's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. How about you, Pat? Who influences your work today?
For me, there's a couple creators who I really enjoy. I really love Scott Kurtz. He's a web cartoonist who does Table Titans. It's like a Dungeons and Dragons comic, but his line art is very clean and crisp, and I just like it. Just when I was really starting to try to learn how to draw, I tried to like emulate him almost. But now I also really enjoy Giant Days just because it looks so animated. It's John Allison, and I believe Max Sarin is the artist on that book. And it's so animated while still being like smooth lines, which is like, that's the key to my heart, art-wise.
Right.
But I also just read at the end of last year, The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang, and that book was like amazing. I loved it from cover to cover, and I think that's probably my favorite book right now.
Yeah, it certainly got a lot of attention last year, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So we're here talking in the context of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. So with that in mind, I'm wondering if you have any favorite convention or festival moments that you like to share.
So this is our first TCAF, and we've been wanting to attend it for like forever, and we were really looking forward to it last year, but with the pandemic, we couldn't go. So we're really lucky that they had it virtual this year.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it, at least from an energy standpoint, getting to talk back and forth with creators online and stuff like that, and share everybody's work. It's been a really good time. I guess like my favorite regular convention year memories always stem from just like fun interactions at the table with somebody who just like rolls up and is just really excited to see somebody who looks like them or something in a comic book.
Right.
And, little people who like our stuff we're big fans of them.
Nice. Good. So speaking of TCAF, I understand you have some books that you're exhibiting. I wonder if you could talk a bit about them and perhaps the origins of each as well.
Yeah, totally. We have a few books. Legends of Fomora is our full-length graphic novel. We actually just kickstarted it last year. And I've been working on it for a while now. I actually started it on my own, out of the idea of just like, I wanted a fantasy story that had to deal with not knights and dragons, but like nature. And I kind of wanted to include a little bit of this like Irish cairnstone feel to it. I went to see like my grandfather's home that he was born in Ireland a few years ago, and it like really affected me. And I wanted to like bring that into the comic as much as I could. But I am not a very strong writer, so I had to get somebody to help me out, and Mardell is very good at that. And so, yeah, the story is basically about like these three friends who are tracking down this monster that attacked their home village, and they bite off far more than they can chew. And they start to unravel just like this mystery and magic that's like deep in the world. That's like it's a magic that comes from Femora, is like the planet, the Earth, and it kind of emanates from there. And they discover as they go. It's a lot of fun.
Sounds good. And you've got some other books too that you're promoting as well.
Yeah. So while Pat was making or starting Legends of Fomora, halfway through, we also made a short comic that takes place in the same world, and it's called The Forgotten Village, and it follows Mishna as she leaves her village, and then when she wants to come back, she can't because there's a magic protecting her village. And I came up with that story, and because I had to move a lot as a child, and the idea of home was was kind of like hard to grasp. And so I wanted it to be like, how is she going to find her home, and like what it takes. So.
Right. Very good. Very good. And there's also a short story called Hungary, I think you did as well?
Yeah, so that's our mini comic, and it's kind of like an autobio, and it's just a memory of my mom and I when we lived in Mexico, and we would go to the market every weekend. So it follows like just a day in the market with my mom, and it's kind of like a thank you letter to her, but in comic form, of just like how much she's done for me and how I appreciate it.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So I want to switch gears a wee bit and talk about your collaborative process. Mardell, you're the writer, and Pat, you're the illustrator. I'm wondering if you could explain to me the process of how you come up with a story and how it ends up to being a finished work. If you could walk me through that.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It changes a little bit every time. But I think it starts with like one of us pitches the other one on an idea.
Yeah.
And like almost always the other person shoots it down.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think I've pitched Pat like 5 ideas, and he's like, I hate all of them except for like the 6th idea. And it's like, I'm pretty sure they're great. You just need to give it a chance.
But after we get the pitch going, we sort of sit down together and we talk. We don't really talk plot. We talk characters, really, right? We try to decide who this story's about and what they want to do, and we fill the rest in afterward. And
it's about I come up with a couple drafts for our current project that we're working on. I think I'm on my 6th draft. And it's still not there.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah, we sit down. Mardell works on her first draft, and then I get to take a look at it, give notes, and that's when I start doing character sketches and stuff. And then she'll come back. I mean, the last time I gave notes, Mardell basically cut out the middle of the story.
And rewrote it.
Yeah. And then brought it back to me. It was awesome. It was way better. But I was just like, I'm not sure that any of my notes are helpful anymore. But yeah, it was, I like the process. It's a lot of back and forth. And we've grown, I think, by doing this together. Because at the beginning, there was a lot more just like, well, this is how I work and this is how I work. But and we have to try to like find a middle ground. And now we've got sort of like a rhythm going and a shorthand where we like, you know, get how the other person thinks. We get what they like. We know how to like say like, what if we try this? You know what I mean?
We've also gotten less defensive criticism.
We've gotten much better with criticism.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Pat, I was going to ask you as an artist, if you're an analog or digital artist, and someone told me recently that I shouldn't be saying traditional artist because traditional could be digital today. So are you analog or are you more digital, I guess?
I am more digital. I will work in a sketchbook in like the early stages, but even at the end of the sketchbook process, I transfer over to the computer. Because that's like my medium. That's how I learned. I started drawing comics like at my desk at work. And so I would draw them on Post-it notes. And then eventually I was like, oh, I should do this at home and see if I can get some better tech. Because I sort of romanticized webcomics for a little while when I was like in high school, and sort of wanted that to be my whole shtick. But yeah, so I work on a Cintiq now, and I use Clip Studio. Pretty much what I use for everything from pencils to inks to colors. And then some final work I do in Affinity Publisher to like set pages and stuff like that. But mostly I use Clip Studio, and it's a lot of, I like it. For me, I have no real formal art training, so I just sort of make a lot of things up on my own, and it's very forgiving in that regard.
Right. It's a very popular program I hear these days. A lot of folks I talk to talk a lot about it, so it's great. The other thing that happens at conventions and festivals is people coming up and asking about making their own comic books. I'm wondering, what advice would you give to someone if they came up to you at a show?
I think, just start writing a story. Kind of like if you have one in mind, if you don't even have one, and you just have like an image. Like sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah. I think just start is really helpful, and I would say that no drawing exists in a vacuum. So like if you're looking at a drawing and you think you could get better, you're not wrong. You're right. You can always improve, and like every drawing you make makes you better on the next drawing. It's like this whole like growth mindset continuum of like you can't get worse at something you do every day. Yeah.
Okay, good advice for sure. So you've talked about some of the books you're exhibiting at TCAF, but I'm wondering what's next for you. Do you have any projects coming down the road that you can talk about?
Yeah. So we're like we said, I'm on draft 6 of our current project. Its working title is called Project Jupiter, and it's a sci-fi adventure that takes place in a small town.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah. And in space.
Yeah, that one, it's still like we're still fleshing it out, and we're posting on Patreon a lot of like the detail work, but it's not ready. We probably won't have real pages done until fall.
Oh, I was going to say summer.
Oh.
I'm being optimistic.
Right. Sure. Well, something to look forward to. So the other thing we do at conventions, in addition to talking to people, are buying books. So I'm wondering, where do you recommend people go to buy your books?
Right now, unless you're local to where we live, you really can only get them on our website, which is goatsheadstudios.com. And there's a little shop there, and everything we have is available. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. Okay. We don't have any distribution anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great place then. Super. Yeah. So you mentioned your website, but I'm wondering where else you would recommend people go online to find out more about your current and future projects.
So other than our website, I'd say we're on Instagram at Goat's Head Studios, and I'm on Twitter at Pat Natevsky. And
I'm on Twitter at Mardell Makes.
Yeah, and we just sort of chat about the process and our days there. I guess the only other place would be our Patreon, which is if you just go to Patreon, it's Goat's Head Studios. And that's about it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
I hope everyone has enjoyed TCAF and got some great books out of it. Support your local indie bookstore, I guess.
Thanks to Mardell and Pat for the chat. You can discover more about Pat on Twitter at PATNIETUPSKI. And you can discover more about Goat's Head Studios online at goatsheadstudios.com. Thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. And please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.